And I went up to get this little bitty sticker right here. Look familiar? Little tiny sticker. They give it to you when you register your car, and you stick it on the back of your license plate. That way you're not considered to be riding dirty. And the clerk at the desk told me it was about $500 for that sticker. And they won't even issue your tags unless you pay. It was at that moment that I realized that Kentucky might not be my final destination. What's up, it's Victor Pham, your Cincinnati realtor. If you're new to this channel, we talk about all things Cincinnati, all things real estate. So if you want to know what it's like to live, work, eat, play, and chill in Cincinnati and the Cincinnati suburbs, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you don't miss any new videos the moment I put them out. I'm getting messages, texts, emails, and reach outs all the time from people finding me on YouTube. People like this and that. And you and you and you and you. All these people reaching out to me trying to get information about moving to Cincinnati, Ohio, and I absolutely love it. Many of you guys have helped relocate to Cincinnati from other areas in the country and buy homes right here in Cincinnati. So if you're thinking about buying a house or selling a house in Cincinnati or the Cincinnati suburbs, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure I can help you too. And remember, when it comes to houses in Cincinnati, you can always call Vic. All right, let's dive right into it. I've lived in Northern Kentucky. I've lived in Cincinnati, which is currently where I live right now. So I've seen the best and the worst of both worlds, both sides of the river. I'm going to unpack the differences of living in most of the common categories that people are researching when they're thinking about making a move to another city. All right, we're going to look at crime, demographics. We're going to look at taxes, cost of living, all that good stuff you need to know if you're thinking about making a move to Cincinnati, Ohio, or somewhere in Northern Kentucky. Just a little bit on the geography. If we look at the map here, Northern Kentucky borders Cincinnati, so they both share that riverbank. And there's some really beautiful views from both sides, especially at nighttime. Honestly, I think Northern Kentucky has the better view just because Cincinnati's downtown area has much larger buildings than they have on the Northern Kentucky side. There's just much more massive buildings, and when they are lit up at nighttime, it's a really gorgeous sight. So I think Kentucky has the edge on the views, in my opinion. There's multiple bridges that you can take back and forth through Cincinnati. I think the most common bridge would be the Brent Spitz Bridge because it's the most centralized bridge of them all. It runs straight through I-75 or I-71. Northern Kentucky is generally comprised of the three most northern counties in Kentucky, which are Kenton County, Boone County, and Campbell counties. These are the bordering counties that touch the Cincinnati area. On the Ohio side, you have Hamilton County, which is where the actual city of Cincinnati is located. And you also have Butler, Warren, and Claremont counties. All right, so these are typically the 7 counties that we're talking about when we're discussing the metro Cincinnati area. There's a few more in Indiana, but we're not focused on those in this video. We're just talking about Northern Kentucky and Cincy. So those 7 counties are the metro areas we're focused on here. Now, Northern Kentucky residents account for about 22% of the Cincinnati Metro's population, with about 450,000 people out of the 2 million residents in the area. The most populated cities in the 3 Northern Kentucky counties are going to be Covington, Florence, and Fort Thomas. As far as the culture goes in Northern Kentucky, when I was in middle school and high school in Northern Kentucky, it was really not that diverse. You didn't have that much culture, didn't have that much racial diversity either. I used to live in a town called Edgewood, Kentucky, and there was virtually no diversity in those school systems. And you will see that is a lot more prevalent in the Kentucky cities than on the Cincinnati side. You won't see as big of a mixture of people on the Kentucky side. However, flash forward to today, about 16, 17 years later, I'm seeing a lot more diversity in these Northern Kentucky areas. My oldest child goes to school in Northern Kentucky still, and compared to what it used to be Back in my day, you are definitely getting a much more diverse mixture of cultures, ethnicities, and different groups of people in these areas. Especially in the Florence area, Erlanger, and Covington, the places bordering closest to Cincinnati. I think a big reason for that, honestly, is back in the day, Covington, Kentucky, which is probably the most urban city in Northern Kentucky, had the highest concentration of poor minorities in Northern Kentucky. And over time, a lot of these families would just move further and further south into the better Kentucky communities. And a few generations later, you have a deeper mixture of people being cultured into the better communities and the better suburbs in Kentucky. So I think it's better than it used to be diversity-wise, but compared to Cincinnati, I don't think it's really competing with Cincinnati on the diversity. You're gonna get a lot more diversity in your schools and your neighborhoods. I think a lot more cultural events as well. There's all kinds of foods to choose from as far as different countries and different culture foods from all over the world. It just seems to be more prevalent once you're on the Cincinnati side. You can really see it too in the artwork, the murals, and just the overall kind of vibe. You can really feel it. So if diversity and culture matter to you, Cincinnati is going to win in that category. All right, two of the closest substantially sized Northern Kentucky cities closest to inner city Cincinnati are going to be Covington, Kentucky, and also Newport, Kentucky. Both of them are located essentially right on the Ohio riverbank. And on paper, most of the crime in Northern Kentucky is heavily concentrated in these two areas. They're probably going to have the worst rankings as far as crime when you're looking at the data. You know, it's crazy because right on the other side of the river is downtown Cincinnati, which gets a lot of reported crime as well. So I don't know, maybe there's something about being close to the river and that's easy access back and forth between the states that creates situations for crime. I don't know. Maybe there's something in the water. Maybe it's that Ohio River water. Maybe people were drinking it.
That's disgusting.
Please don't do that. Don't drink river water. But Covington, Kentucky has a population of about 40,000 people, and Niche.com has them at a C for crime and safety. Newport, Kentucky is less than half of that in population with a very similar ranking. I think the biggest difference in crime when comparing both sides of the river really starts to show when you're comparing the different suburbs. Kentucky has a much more sparse kind of suburban feel. It's almost kind of rural. And there are less suburbs than you're going to get on the Ohio side. But Kentucky's suburbs are some of the highest rated suburbs in the entire area. In fact, Niche.com believes Fort Thomas, Kentucky is the best place to live in the entire state of Kentucky. That's number one, the best. Cincinnati is really mixed up. Every few blocks it just seems like a different world sometimes if you get into certain parts of Cincinnati. It can just change into a completely different place.
I'm on one side, see? I'm on the other side. I'm on the East Bank. I'm on the West Bank.
It's kind of crazy actually, but you really got a lot of options there, and many of those suburbs are average and don't rank in the tops as far as crime and safety. So when comparing crime in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky is going to be the winner on that one. On paper, it's just a safer place and it's more suburbs than anything else. The Northern Kentucky side does not have as big of an urban area as Cincinnati, and I think that's a big reason why you get less reported crime. So there's some different costs in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati that you should be aware of if you're going to be considering making a move to either one of them. Now, as far as the sales tax rate, you're going to be paying about 6% on the dollar for everything you buy in Kentucky compared to Cincinnati, Ohio, where the sales tax rate right now is right around 6.5%, so a little bit higher. If you're a homeowner in Cincinnati, you're paying between $2,700 and $3,000 per year in property taxes. Now, the tax rate on the Cincinnati side can fluctuate dramatically as you're getting into different neighborhoods and different school districts. Typically, if you want to buy a house in a really great school district, your taxes are going to be higher. What's good about living on the Kentucky side is taxes aren't too horrible. If you're in Boone County, where suburbs like Burlington, Florence, Union, and Walton, Kentucky are, your property tax rates are actually pretty decent. The median property taxes paid yearly for Boone County residents in Kentucky is only about $1,500 per year. Kenton County not too far off at about $1,500, and Campbell County as well around the same tax rates. Also keep in mind, Kentucky has something called a vehicle usage tax, meaning they tax you on the fair market value of every vehicle you get registered in Kentucky. I remember back when I was living in Kentucky, I went up to get my registration renewed on my vehicle, and I went up to get this little bitty sticker right here. Look familiar? Little tiny sticker. They give it to you when you register your car, and you stick it on the back of your license plate. That way you're not considered to be riding dirty. And the clerk at the desk told me it was about $500 for that sticker, and they won't even issue your tags unless you pay. It was at that moment that I realized that Kentucky might not be my final destination. But just keep that in mind. They will tax you on the value of your vehicle. I was only driving a Nissan Altima at the time, so if you're a luxury car person, you got the upscale cars, you're gonna be paying a lot more than I was.
How much for the car?
She's not for sale.
In Cincinnati, on the other hand, you're going to pay a flat rate for your vehicle registration every single year, no matter what kind of car that you drive. And it has fluctuated between $50 and $60 for me over the last 5 or 6 years or so. For that tag I just renewed, I paid about $57. So just keep that in mind when you're comparing both sides. That may or may not be a game changer for you. Depends on what's important to you. Home values in Cincinnati are going to be around $150,000 near the inner city. I have several videos on the channel that dive deep into the affordability of different areas in Cincinnati. They're definitely worth checking out, some of those, if you're scouting different areas in different suburbs. If you're on the Kentucky side, somewhere desirable like Burlington, Kentucky, you're at about $175,000. Union, Kentucky, which is considered one of the most desirable places to live in Boone County, you're at about $280,000. So a little more upscale. Erlanger, $140,000. Covington, $120,000. So kind of like Cincinnati, you get a lot of suburbs that can get up there in price, like Edgewood, Kentucky, Crescent Springs, Villa Hills, Independence. The further away from the river you get, the more desirable and expensive it gets as well. Pretty similar to being on the Cincinnati side. If you're comparing the home prices of both sides, Cincinnati will probably have the edge as far as overall affordability. In Cincinnati, you're going to have a much bigger inner city region and also a much bigger suburban region on the outside as well. So there's a lot more to choose from as far as different types of neighborhoods. Not to say that Kentucky is not affordable, because it very much is. You can do pretty well on a budget in many neighborhoods in northern Kentucky, but Cincinnati just has a wider option of affordable places to choose from, if that makes sense. I'm going to say it's pretty even on the school districts on both sides. Northern Kentucky has some phenomenal school districts, and several of them have always fallen in the tops of some of the best in the entire state of Kentucky. Good example is Fort Thomas, right here at the top of that list. Campbell County, also in Northern Kentucky, and Beechwood schools, also on this list. On the Cincinnati side, you're going to have some of the top performing schools and school districts in the state of Ohio as well. If you missed that video I made about the top school districts in Cincinnati, Ohio, you can check out that video up here. But yes, it's pretty even with the school selection. Like I said earlier, the biggest difference I think just might be more diversity on the Cincinnati side. You'll probably get more diversity in the schools, but the overall school performance is pretty close between the two. There's a lot to choose from on both sides as far as high performing schools. If you've heard of the Newport Aquarium before, it is one of the most popular aquariums in the nation, and it's on the Northern Kentucky side right there in Newport, Kentucky. It's a really cool exhibit to see, and it also happens to be right on Newport on the Levee, which is a great place to catch a movie, go for a walk on the riverbank and take in some of those views from the Kentucky side. There's a bunch of places to eat there, all kinds of stuff to get into. Also on the Kentucky side, if you're in the Covington area, there's some pretty jumping spots. They do have somewhat of a nightlife going on over there in the Main Strasse area. A few places downtown Covington also that get hopping on the weekends and at nights when the weather gets nice. All this is going to be closer to the riverbank. When you start to get further and further away from the river in Kentucky though, your options for fun really start to get limited. Some of these places in Kentucky can get pretty rural and industrial, and you're not going to get as much action, just really more suburbs and businesses and industrial space. Sometimes really farmish types of land. Hey, Florence, Kentucky does have a water park and a skate park right next door to each other. I know this because I used to live right up the street from both of them. But those are pretty popular in the summer. But if you're moving to Kentucky strictly for things to do, you're probably going to be upset. On the Cincinnati side, you'll get a lot more options. This is where you're going to have all your big sports teams, a lot more nightlife, dining options, exhibits and museums and festivals all year long, pretty much. Everything you might want in a small major city. And even on the outskirts of the city, when you get further away from the city, you got options there too. So on the Ohio side, I think the catalog is much bigger and offers a wider range of things to do than they do on the Kentucky side. So Kentucky folks, don't curse me out if you disagree. I lived in Kentucky for many years, and a lot of times we'd come over here to the Cincinnati side just because there was more stuff to get into. We kind of ran out of options after so long. But to each his own, everyone has different preferences. I really hope this video helped if you're researching places to live in Cincinnati or Northern Kentucky. If you're thinking about buying a home in Cincinnati or the Cincinnati suburbs, feel free to reach out to me. Let's get the conversation going. I'd love to help you. I also have partners that can help you if you're interested on the Kentucky side as well. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That way you don't miss anything new about what's happening here in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you want to see some more cool videos about what it's like living in Cincinnati, Ohio, start with these videos right here. Thanks for watching, and remember, when it comes to houses in Cincinnati, you can always call Vic.